Tim Griggs, welcome to the Pre-Construction Podcast.
Good to be here.
Love it. Excited to get into this today. You're up early. You're in Austin, Texas. We really appreciate you getting up before work kicks off and giving us some of your time.
Of course. Happy to be here, man.
Good. So, for anybody looking to listen to this podcast, what are you going to hear today? You're going to hear Tim Griggs, Director of Estimating at OHT Partners. So, we're going to be talking a lot about multifamily construction, about the market. We're going to talk about the numbers. We're going to be talking about the optimism that in 2025, the market's going to bounce back. But you've got a different logic on that, Tim. So, I'm looking forward to getting into that. Obviously, we'll talk about your background. We'll talk about subcontractors. We'll talk about the inflation cycle, real estate market, economy. So loads to get through. But what a beautiful place to start. Before we started recording, Tim told me that he relocated from Little Rock to Austin 15 years ago when he was 22. What was that like, Tim? And what brought you to Austin? You were ahead of your time because everybody's moving there now, but you did it 15 years ago.
Yeah, I did it because I was pursuing a music career and I came down, I got an offer from a small record label here in Austin and that fizzled out in about a year. So after a year of being here, I was like, uh, now what do I do?
So
Um,
singer songwriter.
yeah.
Brilliant. What was your what was your go to? Were you a type of singer songwriter?
Yeah, I did like alternative, uh, you would call it adult art alternative, it was singer-songwriter alternative rock.
Brilliant. Tell me, there's some of your stuff still out there.
Yeah, it's on. I think it's all on Spotify and Apple Music and on YouTube, and it's
Love it.
scattered around.
So all I have to do is kind of Google Tim Greggs.
Yeah, yeah, I've got like 100 songs on SoundCloud, and
Love
yeah,
it.
it's all over the place.
And you know what we're going to
No,
do now, Tim? We're going to put an Apple Podcast link down below to all your music for
all right,
to jump
all
on there.
right.
Cool.
Yeah,
And
don't
by
look
the
at the
way,
publishing date.
if you don't like it, the listeners, if you don't like it, don't come back to me. Go straight to Tim. Love it. So your inbox will be just flooded now with either niceties or people getting on to you about your music.
Yeah,
So you came down to Austin. Obviously, you said it at a year. What was the plan then? What did what how did it all unfold into construction and particularly estimating?
oh, there was no plan, to be clear. But yeah, I started estimating for my dad in Arkansas when I was like 17. So I remember my dad telling me, explaining to me what an estimator is and what they do, and he's like, it's a very important job. I remember this conversation clearly because this started my entire career trajectory. Yeah, I remember him telling me that in Arkansas when I was 17, and then I was like, I don't want to do construction. I want to play music, and I did for several years, and then moved here and I needed money, so I got back into estimating. Um, yeah, I was working for a mechanical insulation contractor doing estimating. They did piping and HVAC insulation, and that kicked it all off. From there, I worked at a couple of different general contractors. I worked in as an assistant superintendent on a big multifamily deal in Austin, and yeah, it was a big learning experience. I never went to college, so I just moved here and started working and skipped all of that. So I got a head start actually, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I mean, obviously, within recruitment, my game of pre-construction estimating professionals, that's the first thing that they ask for. What have they got a degree, and what is the degree in? Did you get much
yeah,
pushback on that early on, or throughout your career?
yeah, I think I took a couple of pay cuts because of it early on, but every job I've had is based on word of mouth.
Yeah.
Every job I've gotten, so it's all I proved myself because I had such an early start. I had a pretty good knowledge of what I was doing, so I got referred over and over.
And was
But
the
maybe I got lucky.
yeah, no, I mean, if you listen to the podcast, there's no such thing as luck. I always think there's a common denominator between all of or the people that are performing. I mean, you're only 37 years of age and you're already a director. It's there's no such thing as luck. They always throw themselves into that awkward position or say yes to something that's more a little bit more difficult, and that ends up just rewarding them further down their career. The one thing that I want to ask you is the HVAC mechanical side early on, was that a conscious decision or was that just the first job you were offered?
Uh, it was just a job I was offered. Because I did plumbing estimating for my dad. So after I moved, yeah, a friend was like, "Hey, there's a guy hiring," and I was like, kind of need some money." So yeah, I got back into that. It was just a, I don't know. You could say that I was drawn to what I was familiar with. You know, the universe kind of pulled me back to where I was familiar. You know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously your father played a great part in that as well, getting you into it. And then did you find that your skill set, because I know you did a little bit of project manager, superintendent, estimating. Was it your skill set that thought, you know what, I'd be better staying in this estimating side, or was it a case of you saying, I prefer this much more?
Both. I mean, I think, yeah, I was better at it because I liked it more, you know, and I working in the field was a really good learning experience, but it was really not fun. It
Yeah,
was just a lot. It was a lot. Yeah, and then yeah, I liked. I found out that I liked being in the planning preparation side of it, where I'm like putting everything in order. I love planning things out from the very beginning to the end, and then just like setting them loose. I think about curling, you know, the Olympic sport where they
yeah,
set the little thing loose and it slides down the ice. Like that's kind of what my job is. I'm like getting everything ready, and then I let go of it and watch, you know. But I like that part of it. It's probably my risk aversion, right? Like I don't want to be out there like doing it. I want to like set it up and then watch, you know.
yeah.
I'm like sniping and you know,
But
instead
I
of
like
hand-to-hand
I
combat.
like that analogy as well because obviously if you've got the right, I don't even know what you call it. I mean, I hope a couple of people put it in the subject line that the curling ball that slides on the ice. But if you
Yeah.
have that perfectly in place, then and I always like to slag the operations team. It's basically a steering job. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
manage it and it should work.
Mhm.
Because I mean it's difficult. Pre-construction estimating is stressful, but you obviously have got an appetite for that.
Yeah, it was stressful for the first couple of years when I was at OHT, but you know, once I got, you know, multifamily is so strange because I mean, anyone working in multifamily is going to know exactly what I'm talking about here, but like it's so repetitive to a degree that everything is kind of templatized, right? But every job is different. So it's not like commercial, like because I worked in commercial too, and it's like, you know, every building is totally unique, right? Like every different building is a totally new thing, right? Like maybe it's a similar type of building, but it's not the same, you know. And multifamily, we do mostly stick frame multifamily. So wood frame multifamily, it's you know, you have a unit mix sheet in the plans that tells you all of your apartment units, sizes and bedrooms, bathrooms. And then you have like if you have a garden style apartment, it's like 10 or 12 buildings across 10 acres, right? Um, and if you have those two variables in place, like then the site is the only question mark really, right? Because the actual construction of the units is so repetitive. Um, and you get plans sometimes where it's like this is not normal, right? And everything is slightly different, but like to a certain degree, it's repetitive. So we crank out a lot of estimates for, you know, conceptual site plans, things like that. We crank out so many because, you know, I think it's due to like the real estate market here being so hot or was hot a year and a half ago. You know, it's been a huge bubble right now, but people are still flocking to Texas to build, you know, because the real estate market here is there's expanse, there's room. Anyway, but yeah, we processed a lot of stuff, high volume, and it's
And
crazy because we don't really know when a deal is real until it's like a couple months out, and then we're like, oh crap, we have to like really drill in and make sure this is correct because we're like conceptually pricing dozens and dozens of projects all the
yeah,
time. Crazy.
you came up with a brilliant statement where there's loads of deals, but none of them have any teeth. Tell us a little bit about that and what variables are in play to make the market like that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the multifamily market is a real estate investment market, right? I mean, you have like the OHT does our own in-house developments, and OHT construction builds for third-party developers. So we are like 60 to 70% of our deals are third-party clients, other developers, and 30 to 40% are in-house developed projects, right? So at our development level of OHT, we're a real estate investment company, right? We go buy land, build it, and sell it, and if inflation is happening during the project, the cost of the land goes up significantly, right? Um, and we are creating an asset, right? We're creating something that's more valuable than it was when we bought the land, right? But if you take the inflation factor away, like right now, like inflation is kind of stalled, and the government is, I guess, planning on trying to reverse it or something, some weird stuff right now. Like maybe they're talking about destroying money. Like I don't know what that does to the economy, but I know that prices go up and land value goes up when inflation is happening. So I'm curious to see what happens when if inflation actually stalls and reverses. I think it's going to really take a toll on the land prices, really, because they're directly connected to inflation.
Yeah,
So we'll
so
see what happens. But
it's an interesting one, right? Because at the end of the day, they've been trying to now do this for get inflation down for quite a while.
yeah,
can they actually,
allegedly.
yeah, well, allegedly is right. Can they actually do it? And what will the knock on effect? Let's say we have a crystal ball and we know that it will go down. Let's say it'll stay the same. How does that affect your world?
Well, it definitely makes my side way more predictable. Like on the bidding side, it makes things way more predictable, right? Like there have been times, and since I worked at OHT for 8 years, and in that 8 years, there were times when you could hold a price for 6 to 9 months and no big deal, right? That was before COVID.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's nice because you don't have to constantly chase like, oh my God, electrical wire, like wiring. Aluminum comes out of Ukraine and now it went up 4,000% or whatever. Yeah, so we have to go refresh anything has aluminum in it, electrical and HVAC and appliances or whatever, the parts and pieces from here and there. Like it is nice if the pricing is stable for me because then I don't have to track it so diligently. Um, and so that has been nice over the last year and a half, and really pricing has come down over the last year and a half. Um, but it's like
Has it?
it's
I'm interested to hear what you think about the pricing. Is it specific trades have come down, specific products from vendors that have come down, or is it all just stabilized?
it's across the board because um, it's a few things, right? Like anyone does that knows about estimating, estimating is like material, labor, overhead, and profit, right? That's basically what it is, and equipment. But you have labor is not going down, right? Labor is going up, if anything, right? So that I have to explain this to developers all the time because they're like, well, I heard pricing is going down 15%. I'm like, in order for that to happen, material would have to go down like, 35% because there are multiple variables. So the overhead side is not changing. Profit, though, is what is going to crank down, right? Material costs, I think some vendors are actually coming down on pricing because they've inflated pricing so much during or in uncertain times that they're able to pull back. Like drywall will fluctuate. It usually goes up every year, and this year it's actually come down a little bit. So some vendors are reducing, so that material section of the estimate is coming down a little bit. And then the profit side, like contractors are going out of business like right now. So in order to try to avoid that, they're cranking down profit to, bare minimum, which for most of them is 10%, because if they don't get retainage, then they don't make money on the deal. So once you get that 10% profit mark, it's really, really hard for them to go past it. And if they go past it, they're going in at risk of like losing a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of variables, but uh, yeah, pricing has come down, and I think it's material a little bit. Labor, I think, has still gone up, but the profit side is what's getting cranked down. Some subs that are making 30% margin or something like that are coming down to 10.
Wow. Geez, that's a huge
Right.
drop, Tim. That's
Yeah,
massive.
right. Like you see it a lot in like the bigger trades like framing, concrete. They're being super aggressive because they have so many guys on staff that are just like going to have nowhere to go in a couple months. So they're getting really aggressive to the dilemma right now. I mean, I think it was like this during the global financial crisis too. The dilemma right now is how do you hang on to your best talent, right? And not lose a fortune and not go to business just floating the payroll bill. Like, how do you do that? And I think the answer is you go in at cost, and that's what a lot of people are doing. And what worries me about that, so like, what worries me about that is not only companies going out of business, right? That obviously worries me, but the uh, the implications of like what happens when jobs kick off again. Like even if there's no inflation, like as soon as jobs are like consistently starting again, people are going to raise their prices, 10, 15% again, because they're not going to do work for free forever. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that I see, like, because I'm the first person to see it, right? We get the bid, then I'm like, okay, this guy dropped his number from 6 months ago by 10% or something. And, I'm like, okay, I guess he had 10% extra to give back, which is, that guy is used to making 20% or whatever for 20 years of being in business. He's not going to suddenly only make 10 now, right? As soon as he gets a few jobs, he's going to roll back up to 20 and the price
Yeah.
goes back up.
It's
So
a
it's really interesting.
yeah, it's interesting in the dilemma, but you think as well with the subs bringing their prices down, even if it is 10%, 5%, it's still not enough for a lot of these projects to kick off. I
Yeah,
mean, the
that's really
optimism
crazy.
the optimism was always 2025 Q1, and I was
Yeah.
hearing this from probably Q2 2024. And it just hasn't materialized that way.
Yeah.
And you've got a different logic on this, or why?
Yeah. So, yeah, first thing was the election, right? After the election, everything's going to change, right? Or it was interest rates before that, right? It was interest rates. If they go down a point, we'll be okay. And then after the election, and it was just nonsense, right? I don't know who made that up, but like that, I was like, what is that? What does the election actually change? Like right when it happens, like, it's not that directly affecting the sub markets, right? Like or the land markets. I think, and to be crass, I think developers were lying to themselves that those things would change the reality, right? So we have, uh, now it's, rent absorption is good. So for on the multifamily side, like if we're filling up leasing units, then that's great. But a lot of people are having to give back 3 months free to move people in. So they're taking like a 25% hit on their revenue. So it's like the revenue side is still kind of shaky because, if you remember during COVID, we raised rents to compensate for the 30% of inflation that we saw. And it was 30, it's 15 and then 15. So compounded, it was more than 30% over 2 years during COVID. It wasn't 8%.
Wow.
It was
That
not
that
8%.
when you
And
when you
from any
put it when you
perspective,
put it as simple as that, that's incredible. 30% is that. I mean, we talked earlier about history. I mean, your best guide is always to go back and look and see what happens previously. 30% is probably unheard of.
it is. Yeah, I think since the 80s, probably it's the worst inflation in my lifetime, right? Like it's it's because of the money printing, right? Obviously, I mean that's what causes inflation mainly is this. I mean, I'm no economist, but from what I understand, when you print $10 trillion, it doesn't not cause inflation.
Right. Yeah. No. 100% right. And then when you think about history, even during the GFC, what is your kind of take on when the market will really start coming back? And it's mostly tied to inflation.
uh, that's tough, man. I think I've been wrong the last few years. I thought during uh COVID, I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and then after COVID, we're kind of off script, we're like a show that's gone, like we wrote a few seasons and now we're just figuring it out as we go. And I really feel like we're off script. It's weird. Um, I don't know. I think that my personal opinion is that we may see deals start till the end of the year, but it may push to 2026.
Yeah.
But just because I don't know, like that's what I've been trying to understand for the past year and a half. Is like I don't know what specifically will change that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
just time. Maybe it's a little time will help. But I also have never seen inflation actually flat. So if that is real, I don't know if it's real or not. I think, if and this is not, I don't want to bring up anything political because I really don't care that much. But uh, if an administration is actually willing to go no inflation or reverse inflation, it's going to make the economy look terrible, and they're going to get blamed for that. So I think it's hard for any administration to do that, and I think that's one of the reasons they print so much money. Like we made the economy boom, it's because you're creating inflation. So I don't know. Maybe the current administration is willing to do that and look like they have been really bad for the economy, but when ironically, like that would probably help the economy more than anything is to stop inflating.
Yeah.
um, right? I mean, I don't know. It's that's
It,
what I think about. I think about the economic side of it, and I don't know what specifically triggers deals to make more sense. Like a developer would say, well, the pricing's got to get lower. Well, that's happened. Interest rates have gotten a little lower. That's happened. The election happened. Like, what else has to happen? Like it's it seems like the reason just changes, and we're beating around the bush. You know, I don't know.
and I
I
think
think it's fundamentally like if there is inflation, if a GC can lock in pricing, then the land continues to inflate, and the developer can sell it or lease it. Like that is the business model.
yeah.
So right now, if the inflation stops, like I don't know what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
And is that what everyone's fearful of? Because if it like high level, if the trades are getting cheaper, materials are getting cheaper, well, labor's not getting cheaper, materials are getting cheaper, the subs are coming down. Surely it's a good time now to start building and getting prices in and getting locked in before there's any kind of mini boom.
Yeah, I try to convince developers of that all the time, and I'm like, if you start a deal right now, you'll be one of the few that are starting now, and you'll be the only, like for an apartment, like it's 2 to 3 years of build, and then in 2 years you'll be one of the only people leasing a new apartment at that time. So you'll have a monopoly in Austin of like being one of 10 deals that were built and that lease in the same year,
Yeah.
as opposed to like right now, we just have 50,000 units in Austin that came online in the past year at least, and it's it's a it's a lot of volume. Yeah, Austin's weird because we're in, maybe it's not unique, right? But the real estate bubble here was so crazy and abrupt. I don't know if it's like that. I'm sure it was like that in other regions too, but yeah, we pumped a ton of volume into Austin, of at least on the multifamily side and commercial before that, right?
Yeah. So do you
Um,
think the supply is just a little bit outweighed the demand for the next 12 months? Do you think
yeah,
that's why people are
yeah, I think
fearful?
yeah. So I think yeah, if you think about like how some of these guys look at that make their performance, it's just a linear projection of like what's been happening for the past few years, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, well, we've been in a bull market for 15 years, right? Which is great, but um we can just keep raising rents like we always do to compensate for the inflation, right? And they do that to an extent, and they're like, oh crap, like no one can afford to live here if we raise them anymore. Like there is a cap.
Yeah.
They're like, well, it's fine because there are a lot of high income jobs in Austin, but there are also a lot of low income jobs in Austin, right? There are some high end jobs. They're probably more proportionately than like some other city, but because we have tech companies, we have like Samsung, Tesla, we have some tech companies here that are, but like those are, you know, a fraction of the people that live here. Like everyone else is, not very high income. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Can't
It's an
raise the
interesting
rent.
dynamic because we obviously hear all the time, and especially over the last probably 5 years of Joe Rogan heading down there, Musk going down there. Like there's a lot
Yeah,
of big names, celebrities heading down there, which in itself
a lot of
attracts
hype.
people. Yeah, a lot of hype, but that hype kind of turns into something. A lot of other people are heading down there as well.
Yeah.
Do you see the likes of those 50,000 units? Do you see them getting gobbled up pretty quickly and then there being a supply problem again?
Uh, I think there's definitely going to be some whiplash with, they're getting gobbled up with concessions. So like I was saying, they're giving like 2 or 3 months free to a new tenant, right? So that really screws up the pro forma if you give 25% off of a lease, right?
Yeah.
That's 25% off your revenue, right? Um, so yeah, I think Austin is still the place to be. I think it's still a very attractive like oasis. I think it's it kind of always has been. It's just a cool place. People want to be here, but it is like I don't know what has to happen for people to be able to afford to live here, right? Because that is kind of the problem, right?
Yeah.
We have this. So what? Yeah, I tried. It's funny, like you try to keep this concise, and it's like there's a lot of moving parts, but the the land prices are so high here. Like that's like what I mean, not to like throw anyone under the bus really, but like that's what our developers and most developers struggle with here is the land prices are so damn high that you can't like once you buy a piece of land for, 30, $40,000 per door, like if you look at it from an apartment perspective, then no matter what you do with the pricing, no matter how much you beat the general contractor over the head, no matter how much we beat the subs over the head, like there's not enough juice in there to squeeze, to make the
Yeah.
deal work if the land basis was too high, right? And
Yeah.
that's really the biggest bottleneck because that's the first thing that happens. You go buy the land and you have this, idea of how much it costs per square foot, and we work with those clients. We give them like we think this type of product on this specific site is X amount per square foot, and they go buy the land. And a lot of times, what they do is they're like, "I don't believe you. I put this number in my budget," and I'm like, "Why did you do that?" Like, look, I've been 1,000 of these literally in Austin. It's crazy, but like in Austin and San Antonio, like it's. I've looked at almost every site in Austin. It's I have a pretty good grasp on the pricing and like it's. I'm like I'm not gonna always tell you what you want to hear because sometimes the site is really tough. Sometimes the site doesn't make sense, right? We've seen sites with 90 feet of grade change on like, a couple hundred yards. Like people buy this site. I'm like, you're just, I don't know, like there's nothing you can do to make that uh cost efficient. You're gonna have like 20-foot walls everywhere. Um, yeah, it's crazy, but they
Because
some of
I think
them
that's the,
some of
the
them listen and some of them
misconception.
don't.
That's the misconception. And maybe that's why the price of land's so high. Everyone thinks Texas is just so flat and all the sites are the perfect site.
Yeah.
But you've got utilities. I mean, you mentioned something about the radius of Austin, getting utilities, power, everything, getting to the
Yeah.
site is a massive cost.
Yeah, and it's really the dirt here is it's tricky because like Houston is parts of Houston are really easy to build in, right? They're just dirt flat sites and Houston's massive, right? Dallas has some spots like that too where it's just they're such a bigger they have such a bigger radius, right? Austin has the hill country on the west side where it's very hilly, it's like kind of mountainous. And on the east side it's like the Colorado River Delta is in here. So we have all this expansive clay. So you go to the east side of Austin, and you might get lucky and get a dirt site, but a lot of those sites are extremely expansive clay. So you have to scrape out like sometimes 8 feet of fill on like a garden site on like 12 acres. It's like
Wow.
millions of dollars just for the earthwork, right? So you have to scrape out all of that clay and import select fill, right? And then you're uh, or chemically inject it and try to stabilize the soil. And it's so we have this weird geographically, we're kind of in a weird spot. Like it looks like we're kind of flat, but Austin is not really. Austin is like hills and rock or clay. There's not a lot of dirt sites around Austin.
Interesting.
So yeah, so like the rock sites we're used to. We're used to going in there and just trenching out rock out of a whole site. Like most of the sites we do, I feel like are rock sites. And then I feel like the few that aren't, we have expansive clay, so we have to like go treat the soil so extensively or replace it. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's
And I
I feel like
think that
it's just a hard city to build in, surprisingly.
I think earlier that's what you were talking about when you think everybody thinks that multifamily is just cut and paste, but it's the site that really determines a good
Yeah.
site from a bad site.
Yeah. I've even tried to brainstorm on how I can, algorithmically figure out, what a site will cost at like a snapshot. I've built tools in Google Maps to where I can like highlight an area and it will tell me, the elevations and try to figure out what the soil type is based on the geographical map,
That would be
and all
class
kinds of
if you could do
crazy.
that. That would be a worthy tool.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's something I've had on the back burner for a couple of years, but anyway, yeah, it's a little tricky, but it's still repetitive once you get out of the ground to some degree. So
Yeah, and that's it. And listen, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, you mentioned there it might push it to 2026. As you say, it's about keeping your head above water. When you say contractors, you're talking about general contractors you're seeing going out of business,
so
subs,
subcontractors
subs.
first. I
Yeah,
mean, I think GCs. I haven't started seeing any GCs go out of business. We're still doing enough work to stay afloat. It's just, we are losing some teams, to be frank. I mean, no one wants to say that, but it's happening.
yeah,
If your volume of work, drops pretty significantly, then you have, you're not going to be able to keep everyone on payroll. And like, I think someone said, one of our business partners said it to me like this. He's like, the first 20% are kind of easy, right? If you're really flush with work and you have guys that were underqualified, the first 20% are not that hard to get rid of. But then the next 20 is very, very difficult, right?
yeah,
Like that next 20% is like you're getting rid of guys that like you are gonna have to like if you get busy, you're gonna have to go try to get them back and then you have to give them a raise probably. It's it's I I hope that companies have a really um thought out plan for how they're going to handle staffing over the next year. I really hope they do because it's so hard to find. I mean, you guys, that's part of what your company does, right? I mean, you have
yeah.
finding people crazy hard, right? Finding the right people is difficult.
And especially when you've got so many markets going well, and this will probably feed into our
Yeah.
conversation on subcontractors as well. The data centers, life science, healthcare, manufacturing coming back a little bit now. I mean, subs
Yeah.
should be able to pivot to that area. But I think in the
Yeah.
sub market, the multifamily subs are very much multifamily subs. They're tied to that
Some
market.
of them. Yeah. Probably half of them.
Yeah,
Right. And then the other half are like, we're super busy. Like our masonry subs, concrete subs are like, no, we're doing, something out at Samsung. And we're like, well, that's going to keep them busy for a couple of years, So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's funny. Like we have our developer partners come to us and they're like, the subs. This is my boss and I were joking about this because every like every developer that came in our office last year is like, well, the subs are getting hungry, right? It's like they read this off a script, like they're like a news anchor, right? Like they're like they read it off a script and they're like, the subs are getting hungry, and my boss is like, if the next person that says this, I'm gonna lose my mind. And then like the same day, like someone else said it. We just looked at each other like, all right.
Yeah, and it can
Yeah,
be a
you can either get,
and I mean that's obviously what they want to hear. They want to hear that the sub has been hungry as well, but
yeah,
it's
but
just not the
that's
case.
that's not necessarily true. I mean, that's the problem is like if they tell themselves that lie, like the subs, if the subs, some of the subs are hungry, right? Some of them are like the framers, like these stick framers, like they're not doing single family right now. They're not doing multifamily. These guys are desperate, right? Some of our concrete guys that just do multifamily, these guys are real desperate. Like they have to do multifamily, right? Like you're saying, like some of these subs are specific to multifamily, but a lot of them aren't. So like you're not going to get like the same reduction unilaterally, right? You're going to get a huge reduction from a handful of subs, and then like um, one of our big vendors, Flooring Solutions, is a huge. They're like one of the biggest flooring companies in the country, right? Those guys are not, you know, they're not going out of business. You know, they're diversified, right? So they're not like we have to get, Austin multifamily deals started or we're screwed. You know, they have a bigger portfolio than that. Or like, Masons can go do block jobs. They can go do, jails or schools or whatever. They have a lot of other work. So it's interesting, man. I think from a developer side, yeah, they do want to hear subs are getting hungry, and that's kind of true. But some of them were fine. Some of them were doing okay, working in industrial.
Oh,
It's
listen,
not unilateral.
the more the amount of work out there right now, not just in Austin or in Texas, across the board, there's certain markets that are booming, and they're just showing no signs of slowing down. So the subs are
Yeah.
diversifying. The people are going from multifamily into these other areas on the
Mhm.
pre-construction estimating side. So there are opportunities out there for people that have lost their jobs. And listen,
Mhm.
that's what you want. I mean, you don't want
Yeah.
everything going gangbusters because it would be impossible to service that from a people point of view.
Yeah.
But
That was 2 years ago, right? Or 3 years
exactly,
ago.
yeah,
It's
and
it's
that's what my
impossible to
worry
find
was
something.
in general for the market. Because if we did go Q1, Q2 this year, and it went hell for leather again, the people wouldn't have been there, the subs wouldn't have been there, and the cost would have went through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of a catch-22, right? You know, you don't want to have this huge boom where like you can't get all your work done, but you also have like so there's a relief on that side. Like I'm relieved that we're not starting one deal a month like we were in 2022. That was horrible. Um, it was a lot of work, and it was just too much to do a good job, right? With the people we had, and then building those with all new people was crazy. And we had some duds,
Yeah,
but we had right now we're relieved that things are slowing down. It's necessary, but we're also like, well, we don't want to go out of business. Like we don't want to run out of things to do entirely. So
yeah.
like we need to try to balance this out, but it's not entirely up to us, right? We're doing everything we can, but it's we're kind of at the mercy of the economy, and like there's a big economic machine is doing what it does, and we're kind of just following their lead, at the
Yeah,
end of
no,
the day.
I agree with you. It's catch 22. But if anything now, Tim, you mentioned there before about the variables at the beginning of the podcast. What are the one things that you're going to be monitoring very closely? I think you mentioned the subs, you mentioned the inflation. Is there anything else, any other challenges you see, or anything that you see would be a big indicator if things were to change?
Yeah, tariffs, I mean, is a big one right now. No one really understands fully what that's going to do. Um, I think we had a little taste of that last time. Uh, we had tariff when Trump was in office first term. It was, we had quartz countertops. I think was the biggest one that we had, and like uh, semiconductors, parts for appliances and things like that. Yeah, the tariff stuff is kind of a mystery. Because the government doesn't really know what they're going to do yet, right? They're trying to enforce tariffs, and they're like, wait, Canada's going to stop, providing power to an entire 3 states or whatever. So like maybe we should, there's a lot of like back and forth. No one really
Yeah,
has a very good plan yet of what they're doing. Um, a lot of it's political, right? They're trying to say, uh, we're making America was self-sufficient, and a lot of that is like making a statement. So I don't know how much of it will stick. Um, but obviously we're not an island. We have relationships with these countries, and I'm curious to see what it actually does. Because like a 25% tariff on, so for example, miscellaneous steel that we get out of Honduras, right? A 25% tariff still doesn't make that steel more expensive than US made miscellaneous railings, right?
Yeah.
It's like 2x, 3x more expensive to buy it here. So it still doesn't really make us buy it here. Like
Yeah.
the companies that are getting it for cheaper are just going to pay the tariff, right? The owners are going to pay the tariff.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, I don't understand. Again, I think a lot of that's just political, right? I don't think it forces manufacturing to come back to the U.S. I don't think uh, anyone has really measured the magnitude of like price increase that would be. And like, again, it's like not political. Just looking at the numbers, like steel is the easiest example, right? If we can get steel railings out of Honduras for $35 a linear foot, and it costs 65 or 70 to get them here, then like what kind of tariff are we gonna have to like put on that steel to not get it from there? Like it would be like 250% on the material. So anyway, yeah, I think a lot of that math doesn't really add up. So we'll see how that goes. But
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah, it's
there's got a lot of scaremongering and jostling politically. And listen, I think there will be a little bit of helter skelter. Like there will be probably tariffs put on initially with a little bit of clawback then. But
yeah,
that's interesting that that's the biggest thing because I think this administration, without getting too political, the big thing was they were going to take away the red tape and the problems and alleviate a
yeah,
lot of the industry, especially the construction industry. But the tariffs will do the opposite, especially initially.
yeah. It's interesting. I'm just that's the biggest unknown that we're like, our contracts we have force majeure clauses in our contract for tariffs and things like that. But at the end of the day, like for midstream through a project, it's going to be really hard to renegotiate the deal or say, hey, we don't have that included. Owner has to pay us $1 million for tariff fees. Like that's going to be really hard to get paid back for. Like
Yeah,
even if it is in our contract,
yeah,
because that relationship is going to be just destroyed at that point. They're going to not want to talk to us again. It's really tricky. You can try to cover it in your contract, and it's still like that's what we learned during COVID. Like we had some force majeure clauses and during COVID, and we still ended up buying lumber at 400%. So it was yeah, it was anyway, yeah, it's not as that's the big unknown, right? I don't know what's going to happen with it. Maybe it's I I don't understand like what specifically we are getting from overseas because people are like, no, we make our stuff here, but then you find out there's a resin that's made in Brazil
yeah.
that goes into the plastic that we make all of our wires out of. So,
I
and
think
so
a
there's
lot.
always some.
I think a lot of that will be coming out of the woodwork now as well. A lot of
Yeah,
like
right. We'll find out.
made in America is actually
Yeah,
not. It's assembled
yeah.
and put
It's assembled
together.
here.
Yeah, yeah, big time. So I fun times. Tim, this has been wonderful. Really appreciate it. It's given us a real kind of temperature gauge on what multifamily is doing right now, not only in Texas, but the challenges that everyone's coming up against. If there's anybody that's listened to this and thought, you know what, I want to follow up with Tim on a couple of things, where's the best place to get you?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Cool, cool. And I'll put that linked in. So that's two links I need to put down below in the show notes,
Yeah,
folks. It's the music, the man himself, Tim Griggs, the DJ, the musician, and then I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile as well for all professional stuff.
yeah.
Listen, really
I'll
appreciate
send
it.
you a link. I'll send you a link to the I did a live recording a few months ago. I'll send you a link to that. That's the most recent thing I've got.
Nice. So you still play?
Yeah, definitely.
Love
As
it.
much as I
Oh,
can.
like it. So keep an eye the next time I'm in Austin. We might get out to one of your shows.
Yeah.
Cool. Love it. All right, sir. Well, listen, thanks again. Appreciate you taking the time, especially so early. All the best and appreciate it.
All right, man. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a good time.